Hello, humans. This is a passage I found recently that's really quite nice. I'm calling it Discussion of the Craft of Medicine. It's from a Southern Song Dynasty book. You can see 1156. The author is unknown, anonymous. But it's a pediatric book, 小儿卫生总微论方. Yeah, something like that. Comprehensive and detailed discussion and formulas on children's health. I just came across it yesterday or the day before yesterday. Somebody on Facebook posted a link to Heiner Fruehauf's translation of this passage. If I remember, I'll put that in the description of the video so you can look at his translation too. It was from a decade ago. His translation doesn't have the Chinese, so I had to go look for the Chinese, and then I retranslated it. So this is my translation. His translation is much smoother to read, and mine, I think, is a bit more close to what the text actually says, although his is not, way off. He's not making stuff up, but he tries to make it much more readable, and I was going for a bit more fidelity. There's a saying about translation that's very, very sexist, so I'm going to revise it a little. And the saying is that translations are like people. The beautiful ones are not faithful, and the faithful ones are not beautiful. So he leaned a little bit more into beauty, and I leaned a little bit more into trying to, not add in any of my own concepts, but it's impossible. So anyway, let's go on with this. I'm sure you're not interested in translation theory. Let's see what he has to say. This is in the introduction to his book. This is the very first, passage in this book, whoever the author is. So discussion of the craft of medicine. Whenever practicing the Tao of medicine, you must first correct yourself. After that, you can correct things out in the world. Correcting yourself means that you can understand theory and principles so you can perfect your skills. Correcting things out in the world means the ability to use medicine to oppose disease. So let's talk about a few things. There's this phrase, the Tao of medicine. Often it's written Yi Dao. He has Yi Zhi Dao. And Dao can just mean a skill. If you know how to bake bread, you've got the Tao of baking. But the Tao can also, of course, mean the way the universe functions and how you can flow within the universe and so forth. And I think he means it in both ways, because he talks about the skills that you need, and he also talks about who you are, how you should walk through the path of medicine. And so, yeah, that's the Tao of medicine. And I will point out, in case you don't know, that the word Tao is a very common word in Chinese. It's not only for Taoists, but Buddhists and Confucians, and it's used in non-religious ways and so forth. So just because it says Tao doesn't mean that he was a Taoist. He sounds a little bit more Confucian to me. Anyway, so he's saying first you have to get your own act together, and then after that you can be effective out in the world. He says, first correct self and then correct things. But while this can mean a physical thing, this is Wu as in Su Tang, the four ingredient decoction, but it can also mean the opposite of self, things out in the world. And so then he defines that the ability to understand theory and principle to perfect your skills is working on yourself in terms of medicine. And then you can use medicine. The word he uses could be herbs, but I think he's meaning a more general kind of medicine. Then you can use medicine to go up against disease and fight disease. So he goes on and says, if you could do this, correct yourself first, and then go out to correct things in the world. If you can do this, your work will help patients and the results will be felt. If you cannot correct yourself, how can you correct things out in the world? If you cannot correct things out in the world, how could you even cure disease? So here at the beginning of my writing, at the beginning of my book, this is the most important thing. I'm encouraging you to learn this first before you, go into the fine details of medicine. Okay, so I will say there, a few places here and there where I'm not 100% confident, but I think I got pretty close to the meaning. He goes on to say, anyone who practices medicine, now he's going to talk about who you should be. This is about correcting yourself and cultivating who you are to be a doctor. So anyone who practices medicine should remain warm, mild, refined. This word warm also means mild, like is in mild weather. So there are two like adjectives in Chinese, but I have three in English. So, you need to be warm to your patients, mild-mannered, and refined or elegant. You should aspire to be humble and respectful. Your actions should be courteous and restrained. While your manner is harmonious and gentle, you must not be presumptuous and expect veneration, nor have false pretenses, something like that. So, one of the hexagrams of the I Ching is called humility, this word here, Qian. And my teacher, my shifu that I had for a long time, he loved that hexagram because it's the only hexagram out of all 64 where every single line has a good outcome. In all the other hexagrams, even in very, auspicious hexagrams, some of the lines are not good. But the one that's about humility, every line is good. So he's saying that's telling us if we can learn to be humble, our outcomes are going to be much better. You come across a lot of people who like to brag about themselves. At least I find these kinds of people. Anyway, he goes on to say, you should gather a wide range of formula books and discussion books and study them deeply for reason and principle. You should understand Yunqi and know yin-yang theory. So I assume you know yin-yang theory by now, but you may be less familiar with Yunqi, which is generally kind of an abbreviation for Wu Yun Lu Qi, which is this calculation method to figure out what the weather's going to be like in any particular year based on calendar information. And then if you know what the weather's going to be like, and if it's a relatively harmonious year with time periods within the year, or if it's going to be really an imbalanced year, then you can know what to expect as far as health and even crops and other kinds of things. So that's probably what he's referring to, because that comes from the chapters that Wang Bing added to Su Wen. And, it was something that was, those chapters were available in his time and it became very popular. That's probably what he meant. But Yunqi can also mean predictions of fortune or luck. So, there is such a thing as calculations to determine if somebody will be healthy or get sick, or if the disease will be serious or mild, or what kind of disease. In feng shui and Chinese astrology and so forth. And this could mean that kind of prediction. And finally, it's also possible that yun qi means literally transporting qi, moving qi around the body. So it could refer to a Daoyin practice, but I think it means the Wu Yun Lu Qi thing. So, today that's not, most people don't practice that, but basically it's telling us we have to understand the environment, the weather qi that's around us, the season that we're in. And we also have to know yin yang theory, which means, again, we have to know the season we're in, and day and night, and how to live and how to advise our patients in regards to these things, as well as the yin yang medical applications for every aspect of medicine. You should be good at pulse diagnosis. You should perfect visual examination. So, looking at the patient's complexion and so forth. You need the ability to differentiate between true and false and distinguish heat and cold. So you've probably heard of true heat, false cold, true cold, false heat. That's the true false thing. And, heat and cold, we have to be able to tell if the patient has a hot disease or cold disease so we can give the proper herbs. We also need to be able to examine root and branch and recognize whether the disease is mild or serious. All of these are skills that a doctor needs. On the previous slide, it was about the doctor's bedside manner. This one is now more about the doctor's knowledge and understanding of the medicine. Goes on to say, now we're talking about some ethics. You can't say minor disease is major. You can't call an easy matter difficult. If you're saying, oh, this is such a serious disease, so I have to come frequently and you have to buy all these herbs from me, when in fact it's like a minor disease, so the patient will definitely recover and then you get the credit, even though it was never major to begin with, so you can't be dishonest like that. And you can't say, oh, this is so difficult, I'll need extra, payment because it's so difficult, when in fact it isn't. He says we should be diligent with everyone, whether the patient is rich or poor. We should prescribe herbs in the same manner, whether they're rich or poor, and not just give expensive herbs to rich people so you can make more money. You should prescribe in the same way, whether the patient is high ranking or just somebody from the village. So, hold on a sec. Wait a sec. Oh, up here. Sorry, I meant to mute, but it didn't happen. Anyway. So if you can behave ethically in this way, if you practice like this, you're very close to the Tao. If you act contrary to this, you're a huge enemy of the people. This reminds me of a statement. Sun Simiao has a passage in Chen Jinfeng that is also about medical ethics. And, some of this is similar. His is longer and kind of goes into more detail, but also his is more familiar and, more available. And I think, I'll put in the description for this video a link, if I can find it, to Sabine Wilm's translation of Sun Simiao's ethics and so forth. If I can find that, I'll put it in as a link. So whenever someone who practices medicine receives a summons, like the patient, sends, back then, of course, they wouldn't call in the phone, but they send a messenger to summon you, or today you get an appointment or a call or whatever. So whenever you receive a summons, you can't be choosy about if they're high status or low status. You also have to go to the patient whether they're far or near. as if you're considering your own family. This is also similar to stuff Sun Simiao says. So it's saying kind of a doctor has more of an obligation to the people than somebody who works in other fields, and we have to really treat everyone equally. That's pretty nice. Yeah. You should first ask if other doctors have already been summoned. If they have, find out what, herbs the patient has been given. And especially he's concerned about whether the patient has been descended. So there's this word xia, which literally means to descend or to move down or below or something like that. But it's the word that means inducing a bowel movement. And in English, people say purgation and they say all kinds of other stuff. But inherently, this word means to descend. And so, that's what those herbs do. They strongly descend. And when they do that, then the stools move, the bowels move. And so, some people like Zhang Zihe likes, using this method a lot, and other people are more cautious. So it seems he's a little bit cautious about it. And he says, ask what herbs they were given and whether or not a bowel movement has been induced, so you can know the state of excess or deficiency. If the patient has been descended, they're going to be deficient. So you can see he worries about the damage that inducing a bowel movement can do, if the herbs are too strong for the patient. Furthermore, when you get details of the case, you're not going to make mistakes because you know how they've been treated and what worked and what didn't work, and you know all their signs and symptoms. In addition, when treating children, because remember, this comes from a pediatric book, in treating children, you should pay attention to north or south. He's saying geography. Of course, north will be colder, south will be warmer, and so forth. And the endowment they have been given, which means their constitution. You must observe the local differences of cold or warmth, like the weather, or even, if they live in a sunny place versus if they live, under the forest canopy in a little place that's kind of cold and shady and yin. You cannot carry out all treatments in the same way because they have different constitutions, different geography, different, weather. We have to adapt our treatment for the person, the place, and the time. The ancients were extremely careful of these things. Okay, so that's his discussion. And yes, sorry if my adding my own commentary on it is disruptive of the whole thing. Maybe I'll make a PDF of this and make it available. It's a nice little thing. Okay, that's it for today.